morning, everyone. Today we're going to be talking all about APIs. I have somebody who's going to help me with this. We have Fakhar Khan. He's the CEO of Soft Pyramid. He manages a dev team, so I thought it would be helpful to also have somebody from a technical background who can help us with some of the technical questions that you guys may have. So let me, as always, I have prepared a PowerPoint slide for you guys. So let me start sharing and then we'll get started with the presentation. Generally, I like to have these interactions and these training sessions very, very interactive. So I want you to ask me questions as we're doing this. But for this presentation, what I'd like to do is get through all the materials. We have Fakhar who's going to give us a technical deep dive as well. And then so let's hold our questions till the end, just so we can get through the materials that we have prepared for you guys. Okay, sounds good, everyone? Are you guys all excited to learn about APIs? Who's excited?
Yeah, I am.
They're not as complicated as you guys may assume. So let's get started with that. Okay, let me share my screen, everyone. Okay, so this is the beginning of the presentation. We're going to be talking about all about APIs. This presentation will be in our Facebook group, Business Analyst in Demand, along with our YouTube channel. As you guys may have already been subscribed, if you're not subscribed to our channel, please like and subscribe. We do lots of live sessions all the time. And I am hearing some background noise, so if you can all put yourselves on mute until we get to the Q&A, it would be a better user experience for everyone. So with that, this presentation is brought to you guys by myself, Sarbjeet Daya. As you guys may know, I own the Business Analyst in Demand Facebook group along with a YouTube channel. I am a coach and a mentor in helping you guys transition into the BA realm. And then I have with me today is Fakhar Khan. He owns Soft Pyramid. He's a CEO. He manages a team of software developers, and they are absolutely amazing to work with. They are my preferred development shop for any projects that I feel they can do, they're doing it. So whether they like to or not, they're hooked and stuck with me forever. So what are APIs? I get so many questions, you guys. I get so many questions about what are APIs. And all APIs, what it means is application programming interface. Okay, but what does that still mean? It's a way for systems to communicate and interact with each other. It allows us to build systems easier without having to rebuild everything. So while I was preparing this presentation, I was thinking, how can I drive this message home better than, I'm sure you guys have seen all the YouTube channels that are out there. I'm sure you guys have done lots of Google searches, but I wanted to drive this message home. And when we talk about business analysis or project management, the thing that you guys are most familiar with is building a house, right? So I thought, why don't I bring the building the house technique or example back to our session here today. So imagine a world without APIs in the normal world, right? In our day-to-day living things. So imagine building a house from scratch, which means that you can't go to Home Depot or Lowe's, which are the local stores in the US, where you would buy things like doors or windows or toilets or stoves, things that are already pre-made that you can purchase and place in a house when you're building a house. Now, if you had to build everything from scratch, how would that impact the house that either you're building or you're getting built for yourselves? So it would take much longer time to build that house. We'd have core quality on basic items because not everybody may be an expert in building doors versus the company that just builds doors for a living, right, you guys? So that's the thing that if we're building everything from scratch, it's hard to find those key resources that may have a specialized skill to build something. we'll have lots of unfunctional household items, right? Because we don't have those experts that we would need for each house that needs to get built. We'd require a lot more specialized builders to do everything from scratch. It'll be way more costly, right? We'll need specialized resources and longer time frames to build that house. So that's how I want to relate APIs to your local hardware store, where you can purchase things that are already pre-made that would allow you to have a better quality product at the end. So an interface is where you can purchase standard items which have been tested by the highest quality measures. Now imagine somebody who just builds doors versus just my local builder that I hired to build a house. I would imagine somebody who specializes in building doors and that's all they do for a living, their quality of standards are going to be much, much higher than somebody that I've hired to build a house from scratch, right? Do you guys agree with that?
Yes, for sure.
Of course, right? So again, my second bullet is used, those people, APIs are used and validated by millions of users, right? So if something's wrong or something's not working right, these people that are specialized or have built these APIs will know that something's wrong versus with my functional house, let's say somebody's not living in the house for a month, I won't know that there's a defected door that, like people are walking into the house and stealing everything just because, there's not that many people using it. And we know that APIs work and it requires no special skill to code, already created by something that's already created by super smart people, right? Fakr would disagree with me, but from my standpoint, from a business standpoint, it doesn't take a lot to just use something that's already out there. Okay, so examples of most common APIs, sometimes when you're logging in to a service, you may see most common now login with Facebook or Google. This is a very common example of APIs that are being used today. When you're putting in an address in Google Maps, that's used, that's presented, the directions that are sent to you are used by an API, right? Anytime when you're signing up for a service and you get automated emails and text messages, they're using APIs on the back end. They're not building a whole new email system just for the service that you signed up. And if they were, the cost of your service would be a lot more if they were having to build everything from scratch every time. Lots of the most common thing that I'm seeing nowadays is pay with PayPal, right? That's an interface. Anytime when you're trying to look up whether in the local city that you're in, you're using APIs. Anytime you're booking travel, you're using APIs. So you may be using these things on the back end and may not know that you actually, in fact, are already have experience with APIs. So I want to pause there just for a second and see if you guys have any questions. The next few slides are more based on how APIs matter for BAs, and then we'll continue. Any questions so far? All right, sounds good. So how do APIs, was there a question? I'm sorry.
Yes, I was about to ask a question.
Okay.
This API is mentioned. Do they have specific names or just the way it is, log into Facebook, Google Maps? Do they have specific names for them?
I would imagine so. Fakr, do you want to take that question?
So the question is is the APIs has the specific names or?
Yes.
Yeah, I think we can hold this question for my presentation. So hopefully
Sure.
these questions will also be fixed there.
Sure, sounds good.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Okay, so we'll cover that in a little bit later in the presentation. So how do APIs matter for BAs, right? So the role of a business analyst, you guys, and I've tried to drill this home, is we document the what and or the end result that our business teams need, right? If the API information is known, meaning that your product owner already has a relationship with the email company that will be sending out the emails or text messages, right? Because it's a purchase. Some of these APIs are public, which means that you can use them without having to pay for them. But there are many other APIs, right? Such as email services that you do have to pay for. So if you guys know what the APIs are, right, then you can document the API information in your user stories or BRD, depending on which methodology you guys are developing software in. If it's in the Agile, you would document your API info in the user story. If you're using in the Waterfall methodology, then you would document that information in a BRD. Now, if an API information is unknown, your goal is to document what the business needs are and or the business intent, right? And then we leave it to our IT partners, our IT developers to do research and understand and validate which APIs can be used, right? For APIs that are known, I'll dive down a little bit deeper, right? We work with API owners, right? So for example, if we're gonna use PayPal, pay with PayPal, right? PayPal is a service that, they want more and more people to use their API. So that's an API that's publicly available, provided that, you have an account with PayPal and that you're able to pay with that account, right? Log in with Google and log in with Facebook. Those are also public APIs because they want more and more people to use their platform, right? So if you have known APIs, right? So where would you find them? You'd find them from a website. If they're purchased, you would find them from, their product managers, etc. So you have to understand the API key plus the data parameters that need to be passed to the API call to make it successful. So an example in Pay with PayPal will have the following segments that I would need to give to my development team. And then they will figure out the syntax and how to code it on their own. That's their job, right? From my standpoint, I will give to them an API key if I know it, right? The things that I need to pass would be the PayPal username, the password. If that authentication is successful, I'll be allowed to pay with my PayPal account. And if that transaction is not successful, then I'll get the standard error message. Okay. So lots of questions that I get around APIs from you guys, mostly from this group and or even our YouTube channel are, is it a BA's job to know which APIs to use? And my answer always is no. We work with our IT teams, our IT partners, our developers, our business systems analysts, if you have them on the team, and that is their job. That is their expertise to figure out which piece of code already exists that we can plug and play that will satisfy our business intent for whatever it is that we're trying to build. The second question is a BA, as a BA, how much information do I need to know about an API? And my answer is only that APIs exist for many things. And if your project requires the use of third-party applications or systems, then your developers will utilize them, right? The need to write user stories to indicate business requirement or business intent is what your responsibility is, right? I'm trying to drive that message home that from a business analyst standpoint, whether you're working in Agile or you're working in the Waterfall scenario, you need to document what your business wants to do, not how to do it. That's the role of a developer. Okay. The third question is, what different types of information can we get through an API? There's so many things that we can do with APIs. There's so many different APIs that exist. There's lots of smart people coding APIs each and every day. So if you're using an API for the weather app, it's gonna pull and make available weather information. If you're using Google Maps, it's gonna provide you directions to your destination. If you're trying to use Pay with PayPal, it's going to allow you to make payments, right? And the last one, when COVID first hit, we were creating an app that would show people where people were diagnosed as having COVID in which cities in the United States. And we just went to the CDCR website because they had that data and they had APIs for us to pull that data into our app. So stats for COVID vaccine, that's something that I was doing research on last night. Those stats are also on CDC website in the United States. I'm not sure about anywhere else in the world, but at least for the United States, they have stats where, the number of people that are getting vaccine per state. So if that's an app that you guys wanted to build, or if that's something that you wanted to display on your website, instead of you gathering that information manually or making your developers do all that extra work, they would just go to the CDC website, use the API where that data is already available, and use it in your app or your website. Okay, the last question is, how do we get the API keys to use? And the answer is, if it's an open source API, such as what I mentioned, Pay with PayPal is, login with Facebook or Google, they would be available on the product website, right? For developers, there's always, a link if you look on the website, or there's development specific websites, and Fakar could go into detail about that. That's where those API keys will be available. And for private APIs, right? For private third-party tools that we need to purchase, once you purchase that product or service, then those APIs will be provided to you guys. Okay, I think that's the end of my spiel. I'm going to hand it over to Fakar to talk about APIs. Fakar, do you want to share your screen, or how do you want to do this?
Yeah, sure. Just a sec.
So while he's doing that, do you guys have any questions for the topics that I've covered?
For me, it's been well said.
Yes,
Sarabjit, I have a question.
Sure.
So is this payment gateways also an API?
Different payment gateways, yes, right? So generally when we're working with payment gateways, so let's say you're purchasing food, right? From your local McDonald's or your local, Chinese store, right? They're not building payment gateways, right? For each business, there's a payment gateway that exists. You connect with their API, right? Whoever their payment gateway may be, right? There's many out there, depending on the one that the company chooses, they make a call to the payment gateway, and then your credit card or how your Venmo or Apple Pay or Google Pay are charged based on that. So yes, they're making a call to an API as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, you guys can see my screen now?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, so I think basic idea Sarabjit has shared with us, but like as a technical person, I would try to explain my point of view because I know the inside world of this API is
a little bit more complicated.
I tried my best, like it was very toughest job for me to make things easy for you guys, because for us, like we are doing those things, so we don't need to think about how complex and easy they are. But for the explanation purpose, I have to like choose my words very carefully, which cannot be like complicated for you guys. So
and just before you begin, Fakar, I want to let you guys know, if you are working as a business analyst or a scrum master, right? What he's going to explain to you is not important, right? Not that it doesn't matter. The reason why I've invited him, and he's more than willing to help share this knowledge with you guys, is so that you understand what's happening on the back end, right? But as you know, when you're documenting your requirements, you do not need to go into all this detail. That's why you rely on your development partners, right? Because I have full faith in them knowing what they're doing. That's their job. They're going to do the best that they know how to do.
Yeah, and in addition to that, like I can explain and we can figure out from this discussion that when I'm working with Sarabjit, where Sarabjit is as a business analyst and I'm a developer, so what type of communication or what type of expectations we mutually actually see from each other. So that would actually help us, because now we are collaborating both ends, the business analyst and the development point of view. So let's start with the APIs introduction in more detail. So I'm starting with the things we already have seen or we are familiar with them. And one of them, the example I have here is the Expedia. So almost every person who is traveling, he knows about the Expedia. So when we search on Expedia, like we provide our travel details from like we're flying from, flying to, departure date and returning date, we see that it shows us the results from different airlines. For example, we can see in this example search American Airlines, then we have Delta Airlines, then we have like some other airlines. So this system, the Expedia, has not all the details in their own system about every airline operating in USA. So what they are doing, they are actually connecting through the APIs which are provided by each airline, and anyone who wants to connect with their data, like there are some certain protocols they need to fulfill them, and they can extract data for that specific airline, and they can build an Expedia as their own. The second example I have here is the Remax. And here you can see that when we search on Remax on a property, it shows us lot of data. So all this data is not maintained or stored by the Remax itself, but what they are doing behind the scenes, they are communicating with thousands of websites available in USA or in the specific state or country or area, and they are extracting all this information in one page for us as a user. So behind the scenes, they are communicating with them through the APIs, and it is actually making us available and easy that instead of maintaining all the data of the buildings, or in case of Expedia for all the flights, like it will be very hard for someone to manage this kind of data individually for everything available in the airlines or in the real estate in the industry in the USA or even in the world. So that's why the need actually comes that there should be a medium where an application can communicate with another application. So the developers name it an API, the application programming interface. So it's not a visual interface like we see the forms where we place the input the data and we see the data is submitted and we receive the messages visually in our browser, but it is something in another language or another coding way, which normally simple users are not aware of. So the applications are behind the scenes communicating each other in another word that is called API. So as we were, Sajid was explaining that some of the popular APIs, especially the payment gateways like the PayPal, Stripe, and other payment gateway, they all provide their own APIs documentation. So as an example, I have opened the documentation of Stripe. So they have gave all the information here, how you can connect with their API. And for the developers, they have shared all the libraries in the respective language. So in which language the developer is working, they can actually find their own understanding about that library. And they have provided all the details that if you want to get a balance of your account, so you need to use this API, and they have gave all the information about that. So these are like the public things I just shared as an example. And here I'm going to show you some specific stuff which I actually developed for you guys, and to understand the APIs. as Sarjeet said, as a business analyst, you don't need to remember, you don't need to work on these things. But if you know the insight of these details, when you will be communicating with the developers, you can easily explain your point of view, or even you can easily understand their point of view when they will use some certain keywords or certain specific terminology about the APIs. So as a business analyst, it will also help you to communicate easily and to write your stories for the developers. So it starts with the protocols. First of all, when the APIs was started development, so the first thing was to decide how the applications will communicate each other, in which language, in which format the data will be sent between the applications. So previously there was a protocol which called SOAP, or a Simple Object Access Protocol. It was like previously used, I think, before 2005. It was the protocol which was used between the applications to communicate. And after that, when the technology was upgraded and they got the new things, then a new protocol is actually developed, that is called the REST protocol. So whenever you will talk to the developers and the APIs, you will heard the word of REST, which means representational state transfer. And it actually provides some certain rules, which I'm not going to share here because they are just a deep knowledge of development. But you will heard that, okay, I will work on the REST protocols. So it means that they will use the latest protocols, and they know how the APIs will actually communicate each other. So when we were talking about the SOAP protocol was communicating in this language, which is called XML or XML. So it was a very complicated protocol and very complicated presentation, and but people were using that because there was no other good option available at that time. But when the REST protocol came in, so they changed the world, and then technology was actually drastically adopted that thing, and they started using it everywhere. And now every API you see around that is developed in the REST protocol, and they are actually providing the data or communicating data in the JSON format. So the JSON format is very easy to understand. As you can compare the XML and JSON, you see that here we have some tags and then tags and then data and then tags and data. But here we just see that there is a braces, and then there is the column and the value, column value, column value. We can easily understand what type of data here an API is actually presenting to us. So we can easily understand it's like an information where we have the ID, name, email verified at, created at, updated at. So it likely a user information we can figure out because it's saying about the email verified at. But that is not complicated to understand, because when a developer provides an API, they also provide complete documentation about their API, that how it will be used and how it will respond the data, how it will display the errors, how it will display the success messages. All that stuff is actually documented by the developers. So the second thing I have mentioned here, that is the request, like how we are connecting to the APIs, how the developers are using the APIs. They use it with the URLs, and these URLs are like they have the method. The REST protocol actually goes with these 5, and sometimes there are 6 protocols. The GET method is used to get the data. Whenever an API documented with GET method, it means this API can only response back. It cannot receive any data from the user. It will just display the data to the user side or to the browser or to the other application where this API is being used. Then we have the post method. So the post method is used when we need to create the new data. For example, if we want to create a new user, we will use the API with the post method, and post method will receive some data which can be stored into the server. And similarly, when we use to update an existing record, then we will use the put method. And when we need to delete a record, a user, we will use the delete method. So these are the methods, and this is the output which actually completes this REST protocol, and it makes our lives easier as a developer to develop the things and easily communicate between the applications. So here I have displayed a URL. So you normally are familiar with this kind of pages on the website or even your university application and all that. So we have here a list of users which is displayed from the database in a table, and we can easily like create a new, we can see a form here and we can input the data, we can edit it or we can delete it, right? So this is called like the web interface, where we see the users on a web interface. But when we see the users in the API interface, that will be the different. For example, if we just type the /users in the browser here, we see this page. But when we type API/users, we see another world of information, and that is here. So the data you see here, it is presented in the JSON format, and here we can see all the information which is exposed by the API or by the developer of the API. We can see that. So this information is actually readable by the other applications, because they all knows that if the JSON data is coming, so they have their translators there already built by other developers, and they can easily receive the data from the API response, and then they can translate, and they can easily display it on the mobile applications or the web applications wherever they need to use it. So I'm going to show another example of this API thing, that is how the APIs receive the data and how the API is actually used on the other applications. So as an example, I have here an application that is called Postman, and like as a QA, or sometimes maybe the business analyst can use that this application to test the APIs which the developers has developed so far. So here I have created the list of APIs, and when I provide the method get and I provide the URL and I make a send request from here, you can see that behind this panel we can see the same data we were actually seeing in the browser. So we have all the information available here. Similarly, if we need to test an API which can create a new user, we need to provide the post method, as explained in the documentation of the developer, that the method should be post when you need to create the new user. And then there is a URL, and then there are the input fields. For example, if I provide a field here for my name and my email address, and like some password. So if I make a send request here, we can see a response from the server that the status of this request is success and user has been created successfully. So if we go back to this page and we refresh this page, we should see a new user with my name, and it says that 13 seconds ago, this record was created. So if we need to update this record, for example, the user ID 13, we need to provide the user ID. This information I'm talking about will be documented by the developers. And if someone is testing the APIs or using the APIs, they can easily actually utilize that. So for example, I just need to change my name, the full name. So I can just send a request from here and it says the user has been updated successfully. So if we refresh the page again, we see that the name is updated, and now it says that the user was created 59 seconds ago, but six seconds ago the user was updated. And similarly, if we need to remove a user, for example, if we want to remove Jack from here, we can just put the ID of that user and make a send request. So we will get the response that user deleted successfully, and we can see the user is not available now. And if we try to make this request again, then there is another part of development which is actually handled by the developers, that is called the validation. So they will also validate the requests behind the scenes, so there is not like an invalid request should be served. For example, if user is not authorized to delete that user, so the deletion action should not be completed. So all these things are managed behind the scenes. And here, as an example, I have shared that if someone will put an ID which is not available in the database, they will just get a message that user not found. So this message can also be displayed the other on the consumer application. It could be like a mobile application, so they can like display the message as it is on their application, so the user will know that the user does not exist. So this is actually the benefit of APIs. You develop something for the web, and then you can make it available for the whole world through the APIs. Either someone want to create the mobile application, someone want to create another web application, or someone like just want to combine their the data of multiple applications on the web on one application, like the Expedia and the Remax examples. So yeah, I think that's done for my side.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you, Fakar. That was a really good back-end demo of the things that we generally don't look at and see. So that was really good. So you guys, let's open this up for questions. Do you guys have any questions for myself or Fakar from a technical standpoint?
Yeah.
Sarabjit, I have a question. So in case if we use the Google Pay or Amazon Pay, so is that free, or do we have to purchase that or pay for that?
Right. So Google provides some APIs free of cost, but for some APIs they charge you. But most of the times when someone needs to use an API, they need to create their account. And if the API is free, they can like you to use that. But if the API is paid, then they will ask you to add a payment method and then get the access of the APIs. Like for example, you guys have may seen the applications using the translation. Like you developed an application in one language, but it can be translated into many languages. So sometimes, like if one or two languages, mostly developer convert their languages. But if there are like 100+ languages, then they use the Google translation system. So behind the scenes, we actually provide the English translation to the Google, and Google actually translate that into any desired language. And that API is paid API actually. So that is the answer to the question. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I'm trying to get some easy way to appreciate this API thing. It strikes me like a bank account. You know, every bank has its source code and its PIN code or whatever it is. So your ability to credit someone's account or use someone's account depending on your ability to grab this information. And from what I have understood so far, this information is off the shelf, is ready available. If you need to use them, you can go grab them. Is that analogy right?
Depending on the business need, right? I think it always comes down to what is it that you're trying to implement. And based on what you're trying to implement, there may be APIs that are free, there may be APIs that are paid. So I would always say that just because an API exists doesn't mean that we could use it. It depends on what it is that we're trying to accomplish. So it all starts with business requirements, business need, business intent.
Okay. And secondly, from this, it looks like the developer's screen looks like a command line interface. It looks not like what we're used to. Obviously, that is what is very referred to as the back end. Now, how does that translate to what we are used to? Do you know what I mean? How does that translate to that interface that everybody else uses?
The visual interface.
Yes, how does that translate to
Yeah. So
interface?
Yeah, as you see, like we are receiving the data in a specific format that is called the JSON format. And the other developer who is, for example, if someone is developing a mobile application, and you guys are familiar with the V rule, right?
No, not everybody's is on that project.
Right. Okay. All right. So, for example, if a developer is developing a mobile application, so they will behind the scenes communicate with the server through the API, and the API will respond back with the JSON format, the data I have shown you in here. So they will translate this data into the visual form, like a table or listing or whatever. So they will actually develop that part. Without the developer, nobody can actually utilize these APIs. That's why, like they call it. They are not calling it a user interface. They are calling it applications programming interface. So the applications are programming between them, and that is their interface. It's not for the humans actually.
So if I can simplify that, like in layman terms, from what we see on the front end, maybe is even though you can use pre-made code, right, that already exists out there, your developers still need to build the databases. They need to build those fields where that data can be added to, to wherever the database that you're adding those, new users, for example. So that framework needs to be created by your developer in order to plug in with that API.
Yeah, that is the additional benefit of these APIs, that if you are using that application, you don't need to create your own server, your own database system. You just communicate through the APIs, and the data will be directly stored into the database server. So your application is just a thin layer of, or maybe just a presentation layer of the application, but all the business logics, all the data access, all are happening behind the scenes on the server.
Does that answer your question, Daniel?
It does answer the question, and it also does bring to mind, while in Agile, we are expected to trust our development team to do the work. We don't show them how to do the work. They know what to do.
Exactly. Not only in Agile, Daniel, it's also in Waterfall. The only reason, the difference between Agile and Waterfall is with Agile, we're working with developers very, very closely. In Waterfall, we document requirements, we're giving to them. We're still interacting with them, but not as frequently as we are in Agile. But you definitely, when you're developing systems, software solutions, your IT partners are your other half. Like, in a marriage, you have your better half. In developing IT products, development is your better half. You need to rely on them completely. They know what they're doing. That's what they're there for.
All right. The added question I wanted to ask was to ask the developer, to make your work easier, how do you expect us as BAs and Scrum Masters to present not necessarily our stories? How do you like to see our stories that will make sense and easier for you to develop?
I would like to take that question.
Yeah, sure.
So I think, as we've said, you need to document the business intent, right? Because whether APIs exist or not, right? you need to communicate to your developers what it is that you're trying to accomplish. And as I've mentioned in my slides, if an API exists, right, if you're telling your developer to build, some widget or some tool to do something, instead of having, lots of times when our developers look at our requirements or user stories, they do a lot of research to see what APIs exist for that function anyway, because they don't want to recreate the wheel, spend 2 days of coding for something that they may be able to plug into, right? So because I'm a business analyst trainer, I would always, encourage you to be very, very clear on what your business intent is. Whether an API exists or not, that is not your job. That is, we rely on our development team to figure that out and come back to us and say, there's an API available, it's paid or it's free. This is what we're planning on working on. This is something that you guys will talk about at the daily, Scrum sessions. And you guys, I've only scheduled half an hour with Fakar. We're really over time. So how about we have one more question, and then any other questions that you guys may have, you can post them in our Facebook group or YouTube channel, and I'll work with him to get those answers for you guys. So just one more question.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
So when we are using the REST APIs, will the output be always the JSON or it can be the XML as well?
Yeah, most of the time, like if it depends on the developer. If they are using a modern framework for the development, and modern framework are mostly communicating in the JSON format. But if someone is working with an older system, and especially if it is a Microsoft-based system, so it could be the XML format. But mostly these are the two common formats are used to communicate between the APIs, the XML and the JSON. And the JSON is the like mostly adopted protocol or pattern of communication between the APIs nowadays.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
That answers my question. Thank you.
All right. All right, guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Fakar, for being here and for this presentation. And thank you, everybody, for attending and for this interaction. I love this because we're able to sometimes, as seasoned professionals, we don't know what areas you guys may be stuck at. So I'm happy to do this. Let us know what other topics you guys like to talk about. And if I need to pull Fakar in for the technical deep dive, I will. But again, keep asking those questions in our Facebook group, keep asking those questions on our YouTube channel. We're more than happy to be here for you guys. Thank you, guys. Have a great rest of your weekend. Thank you.
Thank you.
For being here.
Thank you.
All right, bye.
Bye.